Hello and welcome to On Leading with Greatness. I'm Jim Salvucci. This week's installment, One Hand Clapping, when leaders forget they need followers. The difference between school and life? In school, you're taught a lesson and then given a test. In life, you're given a test that teaches you a lesson. Tom Bodett. The folksy epigram at the head of this essay is from media personality and motel pitchman, Tom Bodett, the guy who leaves the light on for you. It's a clever reversal. School offers lessons followed by tests, while life offers tests that contain lessons. The problem is that Bodett is only describing the worst style of teaching. In fact, I'd argue he's not describing teaching at all. One of the most galling aspects of having served as a university administrator focused on student learning was how many of my colleagues, my faculty, and entire institutional systems dedicated themselves to the notion that teaching was up to the faculty while learning was best left to the students. To be sure, students have a great deal of responsibility when it comes to their learning, but student responsibility does not override faculty or institutional responsibility. Yet far too often I witnessed attempts at teaching that consisted mainly of putting information in front of students and leaving them to grapple with it. Admittedly, I sometimes committed the same lazy offense as a professor. Don't worry, there's a corollary with leadership that we'll get to in a bit. The idea that those devoted to education need merely impart stuff for students to miraculously learn is a canard that hobbles our educational system at every level. In the corporate world, this notion takes the form of informational trainings, where the presentation of abstract concepts or complex processes somehow is supposed to translate into future action. Think of that last HR session you suffered through that sought to convey some new regulation, company policy, or personnel process. Maybe there were steps to follow. If this, then do that. The problem with many of these trainings is that by the time the this rolls around, you've utterly forgotten the then that you're supposed to effectuate. Still, HR is satisfied that you were sufficiently informed, which is the extent of their legal duty. It's like the faded sign tucked into a tree on the corner that says 1 hour parking. Yes, the sign exists, but is that lone sign at the end of the block sufficient notice that you'll get a ticket for parking 61 minutes? If you're a cop on the beat, you might answer, yes. If you get a ticket, though, I'll bet your response is an unequivocal hell no. It's the same with teaching. Is it sufficient that an instructor stand yakking behind a podium and occasionally scribble something on a whiteboard? Is it enough that the professor dipped into a seemingly bottomless cauldron of sagacity to come up with the wisest of wise pronouncements? Read chapter 2 and be ready for a test. Can we assume the students will then be prepared for what comes next? Has such a teacher actually taught anything? Here's a dirty secret that few acknowledge inside or outside of education. Teaching only takes place when learning takes place. In other words, unless someone actually learns, no one has done any teaching. That's why I take a bit of issue with Bodett's clever witticism. Just teaching and giving a test rarely amounts to any reasonable form of teaching at all. For what is teaching without learning? One hand clapping. It's the same with leadership. You can't be a leader if no one follows. Seems obvious, right? You can't lead the cavalry charge if there is no cavalry. But we make that mistake all the time. Whether it be the politician who slavishly adheres to the latest polling, his colleague across the aisle who disdains public will altogether, the coach whose players phone it in, or the CEO who has lost the trust of her staff, these so-called leaders, much like the non-teaching teacher, are going through the motions. For them, leadership is entirely positional and performative. Let's start with the first politician I described. I'll say up front that I have boundless contempt for politicians who make decisions primarily based on polls or the number of letters they receive about an issue. If you just adhere to what's popular and safe, you are definitionally a follower, not a leader. Instead, it's incumbent, see what I did there, on an elected official to vote their conscience, meaning to do the right thing in their judgment, even if it means bucking the popular thing. But it's also vital that the politician who bucks public opinion to do the right thing then explain themselves, win people over, or die, politically speaking, trying. If they persistently do their own thing without bringing their voters along, just as with the politician who only does what's popular, they're no leader. They're a double crosser. Similarly, I'm sure you've endured sports teams whose players put in the barest effort all season. They seemingly just can't be bothered to do their best. Or maybe they play well, but all for themselves and their individual glory, not the team's. Soon morale sinks low as losses mount. While fans may be right to condemn the lazy athletes, they shouldn't overlook the utter failure of clubhouse leadership. A more competent coach and staff would inspire the players to rise above their gripes. That's what a real leader would do. The same with the CEO who's lost the trust of her people, or never gained it. While she may retain the title, the salary, and the snazzy office, her inadequacies will hinder her effectiveness. Sure, just as with the coach, her employees will obey her orders, but they will only do so begrudgingly, putting in nothing extra. At best, their lack of trust will result in mediocrity. A true leader would bridge the gap and earn the loyalty and faith of her employees so that they can thrive and be their best selves. Notice that each of these examples involves a title: politician, coach, and CEO. Just as with the titles teacher, instructor, or professor, these are merely positional designators. They convey nothing about performance or even competency. After all, how many times have you marveled at how this hack politician got into office, how that loser coach got the job, or how this feckless CEO landed the corner office? So while we look to these type of people for leadership and regularly call them leaders, they're nothing of the sort. Their positions, their titles do not describe their leadership. The same with teachers of all sorts. How many times in school had you sat there wondering why you're still listening to that blowhard at the front of the room blather on? We may call them teacher or professor and pay them accordingly, but those are just titles. Their positions don't define their effectiveness. The quality of student learning does. Once again, we encounter the direct correlation between teaching and leading. Just as teachers who can't spawn learning don't deserve the title, lousy leaders are no leaders at all. Just as real teaching only takes place when real learning takes place, real leadership takes place only when real following takes place. Everything else stands as mere formality. Have you ever observed so-called leaders who lack actual followers? How do you assure that others follow you as a leader? Leaders simply must inspire followers to follow them, and I can help. Unlock the great leader within. Download my free resource, the Transform to Greatness Toolkit, now at thegreatleadershiptoolkit.com. I look forward to hearing from you.